The New York Mets have absolutely taken care of business here tonight. It was not necessarily the prettiest win once again, but they have done what they've needed to do, win the first two in the series, and confirmed the series victory over the Pittsburgh Pirates. Again, you could definitely be a little bit frustrated with how this team has been doing with not necessarily racking up the run totals that we might want to see, but ultimately at the end of the season, a win is a win and a loss is a loss. So I will take 1-run victories over, 10-run victories followed by 10-run losses. If we can just be consistently winning series and winning games, that looks good. All right, so we got a little poll in the chat. I would love to hear from you as you come on in. Who is your MVP of the game? Want to welcome everybody, whether you're watching live or on replay. Please come on in, hit that like, hit that subscribe. We are MetropoliFins. We are YouTube's smallest New York Mets and Miami Dolphins channel. And I appreciate everybody coming, checking this feed out. I want to hear everything that you have to say. We'll highlight your comments on the screen as you make them below. My name is Craig, and we just finished streaming the entire game, so make sure you like and subscribe so that way you will know the next time we were going to stream the game live, which is planned to be tomorrow night, Wednesday night, for the attempted series sweep. So this game was well pitched in terms of results by Kodai Senga, even though if you were watching the game, you realize that he did not have his best stuff tonight. Francisco Alvarez was an absolute stalwart behind the plate tonight. He was just a wall back there and consistently doing what he needed to do to make sure none of the pitches got by him and allowed Kodai to really go all in with his ghost fork. Kodai Senga's final line for the night is 5 2/3 innings, 6 hits, 1 run, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. Of course, that run came when Reed Garrett came in, was not able to hold the lead. That run did not actually score while Senga was pitching, but it did come in as one of the runners that Senga had put on base. That does bring his ERA up to 1.22. He was really close to getting it under 1 at a certain point in time, but that was there. We never, during our actual live stream, got to give out our rock solid relief performance. And so there's lots of good options, but I think we're going to ultimately give it to Edwin Diaz tonight. Even though it might have been a slightly rocky, it was in the rain. He did what he needed to do that. So our rock solid relief performance is my pet rock I made in like kindergarten. Doesn't have any eyes, but he's still there. So we're going to give it to Edwin Diaz, though you could easily make an argument to give it to Min Panic, Max Kranick, or Max Panic, Ryan Stanek. Either one of those would be decent options as well. Let me know who is your rock solid relief performance of the day. I'd love to know what that is. All right, going through the overall, and I can throw this up on the screen for you really quick in case you didn't get to see the box score of the game or if you missed any part of it. Let me just show this to you here really quick. Lindor was 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. He definitely did not have the best night. But again, what's great about a team that has depth is you can get offense anywhere from this lineup. And so even though Lindor had an off night, Juan Soto, on the other hand, had a great night. Now you might say 1 for 2 with a single, and you know what? But why? 2 walks, runs scored. This is what you want to see out of Juan Soto. You're not always, I'm trying to say this during the stream tonight, you're not always looking for Juan Soto to hit 2 home runs and go 3 for 4 every single night. No, the whole point is he's going to constantly be on base. And of course, because he's on base, he was able to score on Nimmo's RBI double that he had in the game. Pete Alonso 0 for 4. Pete is kind of on a cooler right now. I mean, it's probably not the right phrase. On a cool streak, not a cooler. He's on a cool streak right now. His batting average has dropped from like 350 to 310 over the last couple of weeks. No concern here. And again, the depth of the lineup is certainly something that helps. But pitchers are certainly adjusting to the fact that Pete has made adjustments going into this year as well. And so we have that. Nimmo 1 for 4, but that one was very key. It was the RBI double that gave the Mets the lead in the first inning. Again, it's very nice to see these Mets actually get off to first inning leads when we have the opportunity to do it. Vientos, of course, had a couple of tough plays. We're going to get into the ball through the glove in a second, Darren, for sure, because that was kind of an unfortunate thing that I doubt we'll ever see happen, at least for a very long time. But he was still 1 for 3, and he is seeing the ball really well right now. And at the end of the game, of course, with Acuna on the bench, he comes in as the defensive replacement. He came into Vientos' spot in the lineup, but he came into play second, and then Brett Baty went over to third, and it actually paid off really well because Acuna made a great play at the end of the game in the 9th inning to help seal the deal. Jeff McNeil 0 for 3. Again, not much of contribution there, but not necessary tonight either. Francisco Alvarez just did a tremendous job catching. He also was 0 for 3. His average has now come down. We were not expecting Francisco Alvarez to be hitting 300 for the season by any means, but certainly what he did defensively tonight was great. The star of the night in my mind, and we'll see how the polling is going. What do we got? I'm trying to see all this here. Kodai, we got a 50-50 split in the poll between Brett Baty, Kodai Senga. I don't think you can go wrong with either one here. I personally give the nod to Baty, simply because Baty continues to hit since he's come back up from AAA. Carlos Mendoza in the postgame, I got to listen to a little bit of the postgame while I was prepping. He actually said the whole reason Baty was sent down was simply because of the inflexibility of the roster. And it was not a demotion or a punishment to Baty. And they made that clear to him when he went down. They said, as soon as we can reconfigure the roster to get you back up, the plan was to get you up. So it was never a punishment or a demotion, as some Mets fans might want you to think. Baty just simply didn't work to fit on this roster temporarily. And as soon as it worked for him, they brought him back up. And I think that's a really key thing. And whether or not Mendoza meant that, it certainly appears that Baty has believed that. Baty now has 4 home runs in the last 10 games or something like that. Something absolutely phenomenal going on right now here. And he's seeing the ball well. And on top of that, he had a single earlier in the game, too. His batting average is up to 239 on the season. And his OPS is up to 791, which is just, 50 points behind Juan Soto. And it's really cool to see just kind of that continued development. I am certainly a huge fan of Brett Baty, and I hope that he sticks. And honestly, I hope he sticks with the Mets, but I certainly hope he sticks in the major leagues from this point forward. That was one of the questions that was posed to me during the live stream. Is Brett Baty here to stay? I think he is. I mean, obviously, there's nothing guaranteed. He's going to have to keep putting the work in. We're going to have to keep seeing the results, but I just find it hard to believe. There's a lot of teams that Brett Baty would be a starting third baseman on. And so whether he's with the Mets long-term or not, and again, I certainly hope that he is, but even if he's not, I think he has a future in the major leagues with some roster. And whether I like it or not, it might mean he's going to be a trade chip down the road. We'll just kind of see what happens to go there. Tyrone Taylor's 0 for 3, but again, played some good defense out there as well today. He did get turned around on one particular play that led to a triple, but that ended up not hurting the Mets at all. All right, let's get to some of your comments. And again, if you're watching this on replay as well, feel free to add your comments down in the chat. What did you like about this game tonight? But I got some comments here from Darren, so we're going to address these one at a time. And then we're going to go do an overview of everything that's going on in baseball tonight, and we can kind of go from there. So Brett Baty is becoming more impressive offensively and defensively, hitting the ball where it is pitched. Yeah, that's a big thing. And Mendoza mentioned that too in the postgame, is that he said a lot of younger players, when they come up, they try to do a little too much. They want to prove that they are there, and and they deserve the spot. And sometimes it means they do too much. And I remember there's multiple examples of this, but the one that always sticks out to me that I share is like, if you remember when Francisco Alvarez first was called up, um, the Mets were kind of in this pennant chase and they were trying to hold on to their playoff spot, which did not work. But you could just see how much Alvarez was just absolutely stressing. And it was like, he was trying to swing for a home run on every time. And it was like, if he had just calmed down and relaxed, he probably could have done a whole lot more damage. But that's just going to be what happens. You got to remember, for pretty much every single baseball player, it's been their dream. So they're 5, 6, 10, 12 years old. And the last thing you ever want to do when you get called up to the major leagues is be sent back down. But that's a whole lot of pressure on these kids, guys. Some of these are kids. I know Brett Baty's a little bit older, but he's still a kid. To me, every baseball player is a kid except for, I don't know, Jamie Moyer, who pitched forever. But yeah, he just seems like he's settled in, and I think there's that confidence that goes with just feeling like you've earned the spot on the team. Yes, you're going to have to keep putting the work, and you're going to have to keep earning the spot. But that it wasn't just, you didn't just luck into this position at this point in time. You've truly earned the spot on the team, and he's playing loose. And he's playing like a guy who realized that he wasn't demoted. He was just sent down due to roster configurations. The same way sometimes a relief pitcher gets sent down because of a doubleheader or something like that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a demotion doing that. All right, next. Senga constantly pitched out of jams until the ball went through Vientos' glove. Yeah, I mean, realize that you're basically that play away from Senga getting the win tonight. It's one of those, it's hard to say, like, did Senga deserve the win? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. That's hard to say, but he pitched well enough to win, and he did what he needed to do to get out of jams. It was not sharp. The first inning was really sharp, and I was like, oh man, he's on fire. And then it was just kind of seemed to be a struggle after that. But again, one of the best things that I've noticed, and this has a lot of credit to do with Jeremy Hefner and really the whole pitching lab, is I've noticed consistently, game in and game out, when pitchers are getting in trouble, they're not panicking. It doesn't mean that they don't ever get into trouble that they can't get out of. Doesn't ever mean pitchers aren't going to have a bad day or a bad night. That's just the nature of baseball. Some days the other team's just going to have your number, and they're going to do that. But I've noticed Senga embodies this. Peterson embodies this. Really all the pitchers. Griffin Canning. Like, just because they get in trouble, just because a runner gets to third, doesn't mean they're going to panic. Even Edwin Diaz, to a lesser extent, even though runners are getting on base and stealing from him, he doesn't seem like he's distracted by that per se. And I mean, you could definitely make an argument Edwin Diaz should probably throw the ball over at least once or twice as a courtesy throw over, even if, just to make it work at least a little bit. And maybe you could catch someone snoozing. But just in general, these Mets pitchers are not panicking when runners get on base. Like tonight's defensive lineup. Yes, I agree. I mentioned yesterday, I like the starting lineup that the Mets threw out there yesterday. I understand why it can't be that every single day. But that was really nice. And that's the benefit that you have of this flexibility that you have with this team. And even on the one play where, like, Vientos looked like he had gotten hurt, I was like, you know what? Worst case scenario, if Vientos is hurt and needs to come out of the game, you just shift Baty to third and you plug Acuna in second and everything is good to go. And even if you had an injury in the outfield, you have a Zokar ready to go into the outfield. It's like, I really do like how everything lines up and the flexibility. Of course, I generally prefer that the Mets go with a more offensive lineup and try to just win by bashing the ball, especially since offense is a bit of a struggle right now. But I think just in general, the way that the Mets can play aggressive offense early in the game, I don't mind putting maybe a more defensive lineup out there for someone, like a Tyler McGill, who lets a lot of balls get into play sometimes, where you want to have solid defense. But on most games, I like the idea of just put the offensive lineup in. You have serviceable defense, and then if it's in a close game, then you can bring in the top defenders that you have, like Acuna. Now, I think Acuna is probably one of our better offensive and defensive options at second base. But nonetheless, Brandon Nimmo, new cast of Wicked, Defying Gravity. I'll tell you what, that's back-to-back days, and I that should be noted. I did not put him on the poll, but you could definitely argue that he would be like an undercover MVP candidate for the day with both the robbed. It was probably going to be it would have been an extra base hit off the wall if he hadn't made the catch. It was not going to be a home run tonight. I watched the replay last night. I thought pretty certain it was a home run. Other people were like, "There's no way that was going out." I'm like, I don't know. I watched it from a couple different angles last night, and I'm pretty sure he robbed that home run. But tonight, yeah, I mean that was a big catch, and then of course he had the double that scored Juan Soto that gave the Mets the initial lead. That should have been enough tonight, but it wasn't quite there. Yeah, Derek Diaz has to develop pick and move. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. I agree with you 100%. He doesn't have to be great, but at least just give Torrens or Alvarez a chance. I mean, it was just zero chance. Even if he just wants to do it on the first two, like before he even pitches a pitch, just so he doesn't have to worry about it. At least he does it. And I think every once in a while he might catch somebody napping. You could just do it after pitch one, and you could do it after or before pitch one, and then like after pitch two. You can even go on a schedule with that. Let's go Mets, Lane. Absolutely. So a couple of, do you call up Brandon Sproat? Do you call up Hayden Sanger? Not at this point. I don't see any reason to call them up as a permanent call up. If the Mets need a spot start, I'm sure Brandon Sproat would be in the running for a spot start should there be a need. So should there be a doubleheader? Should any pitcher need like an extra week of rest or something like that? But no, I don't expect that. It sounds like Montas is going to be the first one back, possibly Blackburn too. But no, unless there's a need for a spot start, I don't see them calling either. And Hayden Sanger again, Luis Torrens. I like Alvarez. I don't mind if Torrens gets a handful more starts. I like 5-2, 4-3, probably 5-2. I do want to see Alvarez probably get the majority of the starts, and that's probably what he's going to get. He's probably going to get the final game of the series. I have not seen anything. I mean, they might be keeping him out precautionary. I'll do a check. We checked last night. Here, well, so there is. I'm going to read this article. We'll bring this article up really quick, and then on the Torrens being hurt front. So let me do this. I haven't read this article, but I just typed in Luis Torrens injury. So Mets catcher opens up about need for change after brutal groin shot. New York Mets catcher wants a change after unfortunate injury he suffered on Sunday. New York Mets improved their 2025 regular season record to 26-15 after the 6-2 victory of the Chicago Cubs on May 11th. However, despite the win, it wasn't smiles for everyone. The top of the sixth, Cubs slugger Kyle Tucker was up at the plate when he had a foul tip off Mets catcher Griffin Canning that connected in his groin. Torrens lay on the ground for a few moments, clearly in agony. Was ultimately taken out of the game. Seems that Torrens is now okay. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza said after the game, "Glad he was able to walk to the dugout. He's a better spot right now." However, this seems to be the last straw for the Mets backstop. Discussing an equipment change he's now ready to make. He said, "I don't know if I have to wear another cup or find a way to wear platinum or metal." Turin said. He later added, "I've taken a lot of foul tips there, so it's getting really sensitive after so many. I can handle getting hit by a pitch, but this is different." Torrens has been a godsend for the Mets this season, doing an admirable job replacing Francisco Alvarez. Hopefully, the baseball gods can reward Torrens with no more groin shots moving forward. So, I think he's good, but I think also at the same time, I would not be surprised if Torrens gets to start tomorrow. I think you're going to see in most series that Alvarez is going to get games 1 and 2, and Torrens will get game 3. And I'm fine with that. I think that's a good rotation. You always have the potential to sub in. The problem is at the end of games, there's just not many people. Who do you really want to pinch hit for in the vast majority? Like you're obviously not pinch hitting for Lindor, Soto, Alonso. 95% of the time, you're not going to be pinch hitting for Nimmo, Vientos, McNeil. Occasionally you might pinch hit for Baty, lefty-righty matchup. Tyrone Taylor, occasionally you might bring in Starling Marte as a pinch hitter. Francisco Alvarez maybe occasionally. But the problem is, like, whoever's starting is going to play to the end of the game most of the time. So, but no, I don't see Mets calling up anything there. All right. One last question. If you have any other questions, let me know. We'll do that after this. We're going to hop and do kind of a tour around the league, and not just a scoreboard update, but we'll actually maybe tune into a couple of games here really quick. For that, appreciate you guys, whether you're watching live or on replay. How do you feel about the Mets at the Yankees? I feel like the Mets are rolling right now. The Mets are 2 games away from 30 wins. which is great. Like I said, we'll look at the standings in a second. I do think that I want to see the Mets win the first two games of the series if assuming Max Fried is lined up for the Sunday start. I don't want to have to go into Sunday having to beat Max Fried to win the game. Not that I don't think we can beat him. I just don't want to feel like we have to beat them in order to win the series. And so I would just much prefer that the Mets would wrap up the series and win the series after the game too. And then if we can manage a series sweep against the Yankees, that would be great. It'll be interesting to see how the Yankees bats, their torpedo bats, just their offense overall fares against the Mets pitching that has been pretty good. Not as great as it was at the beginning of the season, but I feel confident. But it's not because I feel confident that we can beat the Yankees. It's that I feel confident that we can beat anybody. The only team that I would be like, I want to wait and see before I say anything would be the Dodgers, maybe the Padres. Those are probably the two best looking teams. I guess we'll probably play the Tigers too, but this is an impressive team, and they keep finding ways to win. And for all the frustration you might have that the Mets are not beating the Pirates 10-1, I would challenge you to look the opposite side and say, don't you think probably 2 or 3 years ago the Mets lose this game 2-1 as opposed to winning it 2-1? Like, this is the type of game that the Mets consistently lost. So, and that's, tonight now is the type of game the Mets are consistently winning. All right. This is all projected, but tomorrow is Falter for the Pirates and Holmes for the Mets. And then the Mets have Thursday off, so there'll be no Thursday game. Friday night is supposed to be Tyler McGill against to be determined. Saturday is supposed to be Griffin Canning. And Sunday for the Mets is to be determined because they're trying to keep Kodai Senga on 5 days of rest. So 6-man rotation. So you might get to see a Brandon Sproat. The interesting question would be like, who pitched for Syracuse like tonight or tomorrow? Would be one of those things. Darren, I like Terrence approach. He usually goes right, whereas Alvarez swings from his heels when he faces someone who throws hard like the reliever for the cut. Yeah, and I still think Alvarez does overswing at certain times. I think that's something, but that's just, in my mind, it's just him being a young player still. And you can say as much as you want that Alvarez should be a seasoned vet that doesn't overswing, but he knows what he's capable of. He knows he has the ability. And you have to remember, too, Alvarez is still, this is like roughly the end of spring training for him in the sense of like he's finally just getting back into things. And I'm sure he feels like he missed out on that start because he was injured and he really wants to help the team. I have confidence that this combination, this Torrens-Alvarez combination, could be a really good one for the next couple of years. And I've always been a big proponent, especially just in modern day baseball, that your backup catcher needs to be just as reliable offensively as your starting catcher. Whatever level that is, you cannot have an offensive drop-off when you bring your backup catcher in the game. And I feel just as confident that in a clutch situation that Torrens could come up with a key hit or a home run as I do for Alvarez. Maybe in some ways I feel more confident. However, I do feel like the ceiling on Alvarez is significantly higher than the ceiling. So, Alvarez's floor is lower. But I've been seeing like people like done with Alvarez experiment. I mean, Alvarez was hitting 300 up until like yesterday, guys, since he's been back. He's still hitting 280 on the season. So Mets fans are so used to just hitting the panic button. And I get it. If the Mets don't win the World Series this year, they're going to find something to complain about in general. But the reality is there's just no need for any panic button for the New York Mets whatsoever for anything. I mean, just look at all the things that they have survived so far this season. And not just like crazy. Like the Mets have a great record against winning teams, the teams that have winning records. The Mets have survived, the absolute decimation of their projected starting pitching staff. Montas, Manaea, and Blackburn, who would have maybe been slotted as 3 of our 5 opening day or opening week starters. We survived that, and we're still surviving all of that. Like, so there's going to be flexibility. We survived injuries to McNeil and Alvarez. We've survived Brett Baty having to go down. We're surviving injuries to Jose Siri and Azokar having to come up to do, like, there's just not things to panic about. And that's why, and we were mentioning, I was kind of getting on the legacy media and the New York media. The New York media is going to have to keep making things up because there's just nothing to panic about. Like, are there areas the Mets can improve? Always, but there's just nothing to panic about. Like, if you're getting to the point where you're worried that you're not beating other teams by enough, um, you're living a good life as a fan of any team, right? And if you've suffered through all these rough years of the Mets, then I can guarantee you that just enjoy the wins. Like, I'm telling you, these are the games that 2, 3 years ago the Mets lose this game 2-1 instead of winning this game 2-1. Why? Because they would have no one in the 8 hole who could actually hit a home run. And when you look at this roster, it's like, okay, you can say, okay, I don't like this exact configuration of the lineup or this roster or what you would do. But look, you've got a guy hitting 240 who so let me just look up here. Let's see. Best. Hold on. I'm gonna do a quick little. I want to just find something here really quick. Let me just pull this up here really quick. I don't know if this is updated for tonight. But in the last handful of days, okay, like last 2 weeks, Kyle Schwarber has 7 home runs. Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Wilyer Abreu have 6 home runs. Then you got Freddie Freeman, Riley Green, Dansby Swanson, Trent Grisham have 5 home runs, and Pete Crow Armstrong. Okay, and then you have Juan Soto has 5 home runs in the last 15 days. Francisco Lindor has 4 home runs. Brendan Nimmo has 4 home runs. I believe this is not updated, but I now think Brett Baty has 4 home runs in the last 15 days, if my stats are correct. Like, you've got power up and down this lineup. So, yeah. No, and that's exactly it. And the Mets can have this patience. And if they need to give Alvarez a day or two off, Darren, in order to give him rest or whatever, you've got the ability to do it. There's just no drop off. And yeah, as awesome as a catcher who can hit is, most important defensive player on the field, hitting the secondary for me. Yep, absolutely. And again, the net base runners caught, the net with base runners caught is still pretty good for Torrens and Alvarez. Like, we're throwing out like 50% of the runners that are trying to run against us. I mean, Edwin Diaz doesn't give you a chance, but pretty much everybody else does a decent job of holding runners on to a certain extent and then go from there. Bruce, how's it going tonight? I enjoy winning. I do worry that so many left on base is dangerous when the big bats come to town. We need to work on team cohesion and bring the base runners home. Living on home runs will break hearts. Yeah, there are probably games where that is true, and I do think that is fair. At some point in time, I'm going to make the video on it because it does come up occasionally. But we've been diving into this a little bit, and you'll find the teams that leave the least runners on base per game are the worst teams. Okay, just in general. And I just want to show this. So, like, that's not necessarily a stat that you want to be like the best at because it means you're not getting any runners on base. And I just want to show a little comparison really quick. And we can look over. I'm not here to defend and say the Mets shouldn't improve in this area. I certainly believe they should. But I want you guys to just do a little bit of a looking here. This is team left on base in 2025. Okay, so first we're going to sort by 2025. Okay, these are the teams that have left the least runners on base. The Angels, the Orioles, and the Rangers, right? Those are not teams that are excelling. What does that mean? They're just not getting that many runners on base. And then from this point forward, it is just an absolute mishmash of really good teams and really bad teams in basically no particular order. Okay, so the Giants, they're a really good team. They do good with not leaving runners on base. Guardians, they're a really good team. They do good with not leaving runners on base. The Rockies are not a good team, and they're doing really good at not leaving runners on base. Nationals, not a good team. White Sox, not a good team. Minnesota Twins, They were not good. Now they're playing really well. Dodgers, they're a really good team. They don't leave a ton of runners on base. But then so the Mets are tied at 19th, right around the Cubs, the Royals, but then also the Marlins, the Pirates, they're right around the same thing. But then go below this. Seattle has been playing out of their minds up until this past week. They've left a ton more runners on. The Yankees have left a ton more runners on. St. Louis, who's on a 9-game winning streak, left a ton more runners on. The Phillies have left a ton more runners on. So I know it feels bad when you're watching the game, and this is part of this. This is just part of that bias. Now, if you want to look like recently, over the last 3 games, now what did you notice? The Mariners have struggled over the last 3 games, and they're the best at not leaving runners on base. Why? Because they're not getting runners on base. The Mets shut down the Cubs, so they didn't leave many runners on base. And if you look over the last 3 games, this is right around where the Mets are. And over the last 3 games, the Dodgers have left more runners on base than the Mets. So I just think that it's a little bit of a bias. So, Justin, how's it going? We decided to do a post game today, so trying to post game show out and see if it's out. So everybody kind of voted in the chat. So we're gonna do a little wrap up and just answer some of your questions, and we're gonna head to around the league. Genuinely surprised the Rockies weren't leading that. Let's see if the Rockies can win a game tonight. Let's go do that. All right, one more comment here, and then we're gonna go around the league. We'll do an update around the league scoreboard as well as standing stuff. Ottavino was another reliever. Teams ran on. Thank goodness he no longer pitches for Mets. Yeah. And of course, Edwin Diaz is at his best when runners are not getting on base for him at all. So I'm never going to come tell you there's nothing to improve on this Mets team, but I just want to kind of give more of a grander overview. Every team feels like they leave too many runners on base. And if you don't feel that way, it's probably because you're just not getting runners on base in the first place. All right, let's go. We're going to go do a scoreboard update. Yanks losing 1-0. Hey, this Mariners team has been really good. They've been struggling here. But they're going to just make Max Fried angry when he pitches against the Mets because he's probably going to pitch on Sunday against the Mets. But we'll see. All right, here we go. Here is the full scoreboard update, and we're going to do that. We'll actually hop into each game here. The White Sox are beating the Reds 1-0. That is in the bottom of the 8th. So we got that. If you want me to dive into more any of these, the Angels over the Padres 1-0. That's in the 4th. Angels had a very nice 9th inning comeback last night. Gave Suarez his first blown save of the season last night. And kudos to Taylor Ward for that grand slam last night. I was watching that as I was wrapping up stuff in the office last night. As Dead Yell just mentioned, the Mariners are beating Max Fried and the Yankees 1-0 right now. Giants over the Diamondbacks 4-3. This Giants team is such a hard team to get a pulse of. I think they're pretty good, but I just don't know how consistent they are. Athletics and Dodgers tied 0-0. That's bottom of the 2nd. All right, then the rest of these games are finals now. The Guardians beat the Brewers 2-0. Brewers just have not been able to get any traction forward whatsoever. The Tigers beat the Red Sox once again. These Tigers keep putting up runs. They are at 28 wins. Okay. The Mets are at 28 wins, and if the Dodgers win, they'll be at 28 wins. And so I've said this for weeks. I've had the Tigers as the number 1 team in baseball for the last few weeks. You could literally throw Dodgers, Mets, and Tigers in a hat, pick out any name, and I don't think you could go wrong with any of those. Yeah, I'm just like, I felt the same way too until I started actually digging into the stats. And hope the Giants and the Diamondbacks both lose somehow. Well, I hope they both end up just staying good enough to be able to beat the the Dodgers here. All right, continuing on. The Rays trying to get back on track, 11-9 over the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays were trying to get it back over 500. Couldn't quite do it. Of course, the Mets won 2-1, as we already covered. Mets record is 28-15. I remember we had a troll come into the chat yesterday saying the Mets will never get more than 11 games over 500. And here we are at 13 games over 500, a little more than 24 hours later. Unfortunately, the Braves beat the Nationals 5-2. The Cubs beat the Marlins 5-4. Nope, the Rockies were not able to get the win tonight. The Rangers won 4-1 in that game. Royals getting cooled down a little bit here by the Astros, and the Astros look to start to get things turned around here. That AL West is wide open, especially with the slide that the Mariners have been on. So Astros are over 500 now with a 2-1 win over the Royals, and that Royals team has been on fire. How did they get? Oh, they scored a run in the ninth to win it too. And there are two games that were postponed today: Twins at Orioles, Cardinals at Phillies. Twins are on that 8-game winning streak. Cardinals are on the 9-game winning streak. Both of those teams have double headers tomorrow. You better believe it. Mets win. So what I want to do really quick is let's pop into the standings because we're going to go do this. If there's any other teams that you guys want updates on, players outside of Mets, let me know too. Tigers Mets World Series, Mets in 7. That's good. I got a friend at church who's a big Detroit fan. Of course, the Lions had a great year, and that'd be really fun. I wonder if he would actually come on. He's not really a streamer, but he is a huge Detroit fan. So maybe we could get. I like that. I predicted Mets and Orioles was the World Series. That half of that prediction looks good, but the Orioles need to wake up and soon. All right, so here we go. Going through the standings. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for you, so hopefully you guys can see that. All right. NL Central, you got the Cubs are 25-18, Cardinals 23-19, Reds 20-22, Brewers 20-23, Pirates 14-29. So yeah, all those teams are well within the race, and we'll do the wild card here in a second. In the National League, the Mets, of course, 28-15. That's a 3-game lead over the Phillies and a 6.5-game lead over the Braves. Phillies 24-17. And again, that Phillies record is not bad at all. So I have zero reason to be counting out either the Phillies or the Braves at this point. Remember, the Mets were much worse off at this point in the season last year. The Braves were already back to 500. They've already made up all of the ground that they lost. Of course, then you get the Nationals and the Marlins, whose basically their only job is to be a nuisance to the Mets all season and take wins away from us that we do. The NL West, one of the two strongest divisions in baseball, I think, right now. Dodgers are 27-14, but they're still only up a game and a half, and the Padres are 25-15. Giants are 24-18. Diamondbacks 22-20. And sorry, Midnight, play taps on the Colorado Rockies, who are 7-34. I think last year, seeing the White Sox do what they did, everyone was like, we'll never see anything as bad as that again. And yet somehow we're seeing something worse this year with the Rockies. I mean, they've been outscored by 129 runs. I mean, the Mets are playing well, and their run differential is only plus 69. I mean, it's just crazy how demolished they're getting. Anyway, not trying to rub it in, Midnight, but Alonso walks off the World Series against the Tigers. Your hope and dream. Hey, that would be fun. That would be fun. Acuna on third, Lindor on second, Soto on first, grand slam to win the World Series. All right, the AL East, you got the Yankees 24-17. So again, this Yankees team still putting up lots of runs. They've been a little bit inconsistent, but they're finding ways to win, and they're finding ways to stay ahead. They got a 3.5-game lead on the Red Sox. I feel like every team here is in play for a wild card spot. We'll look at the actual wild card standings in a second, but the only team that I have zero confidence of making a real big push here is the Tampa Bay Rays, but even they have surprised in the past by being able to put a run in, and it's not like the Yankees are absolutely dominating like the Tigers, the Dodgers, the Mets. So there is definitely a door open here. I think the second best division in baseball, arguably, is the AL Central. Again, minus the White Sox. So it's like you could take the NL West minus the Rockies, AL Central minus the White Sox. I mean, look at this. If you haven't really taken time to study this here, the Tigers are 28-15. You've got the Guardians are 25-17, 2.5 games back. The Royals, okay, they're 25-19. And all three of those teams are 7-3 in their last 10. And they're not even the best in the last 10. It's the Minnesota Twins, who are on an 8-game winning streak to get over 500. They're 21-20. Okay, and you get the Red Sox that are 12-29. They're about the only team there that's out of it. And then you have the AL West, which is maybe there's a chance that everyone in this division could finish over 500 or under 500. This is like the most 500-ish division in baseball by far. You got the Mariners are 22-18, trying to get a win against the Yankees tonight. The Athletics are 21-20. And again, huge kudos to the Athletics for continuing to fight, even kind of against all odds. Jacob Wilson is showing to be possibly everything that the Athletics imagined he was going to be and more. Of course, the Houston Astros are now over 500. They're 21-20. The Rangers are 21-21, and Jacob deGrom looks to be putting back maybe not prime deGrom, but very good deGrom form. And even the Angels, who they got off to a great start, then they struggled a lot. They've kind of been able to even out a little bit here. We'll see if they can put a nice little run together. It's all good. It's all good. Midnight. So it's just the reality of the situation. It's unfortunate. It's bad for baseball too. The White Sox are bad for baseball, and the Rockies are bad for baseball in the sense of just not even being able. It's one thing to be a disappointing team, a team that faces injuries, but just being absolutely non-competitive, that's really bad for baseball. Raul Juancito Jose Soto Pacheco, MVP 2025. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Keeps on this pace, Brett Baty's going to get himself a vote here or there. All right, before we dive into the last couple of things, just a friendly reminder that if you want to support this channel by financially supporting this channel, you can do so via the Patreon. If you don't feel like or aren't in a position to do that, then the best support you can give is just like and subscribe to the chat. The link to the Patreon is here. I'm going to quickly just show you what you would get. You're going to get early access to videos. So like tomorrow night, I'll be producing the weekly 3 Up, 3 Down. 3 teams that are on the rise, 3 teams that are on the fall, maybe some of the teams we just talked about here tonight. But you get early access to videos that are going to be up on YouTube. So you get to see them before everybody else. So just in case you're wondering what this kind of looks like, I'll give you a little preview. So you can see the early access, the power rankings. People got to see those on Sunday night, and the 3 Up and 3 Down from last week. And so we just started this past week. And the more patrons that come along, the more opportunity that I have to make content for you guys and replace some of my other gig work stuff with here. So absolutely up to you. Never any pressure, but it is certainly appreciated. And as always, thank you to my current patrons, Byford the Hobbit and Darren Rivera. Thank you guys so much for supporting this small channel. Let's see. Last couple things, and we're going to wrap things up here. Stop being a fan of this a few years ago when ownership isn't even going to try. Why get emotionally invested? Yep, and like I've said before to you, Midnight, that's the same way a lot of Dolphins fans feel right now. It's just kind of like, I'm never going to give up on the team because they're my team, but I'm not gonna really care until Ross sells the team. So totally get that. Mets are on a rocket ship. I'll tell you what, it's looking good. Oh yeah, I wanted to go over. We'll go over to the wild card standings. I find it funny on MLB you can still look up spring training standings as if it matters anything whatsoever. So we'll put that up on the screen here. Rockies playing in Coors, hard to attract pitching. Yeah, but I mean, they should at least be able to attract hitting and getting outscored by 120 runs. So this is if the playoffs were to start today. Obviously, they're not. But if they were, this is what you would see. Because it's if I remember right, it's the top 2 teams get a bye, right? So the Dodgers and the Mets would get a bye. Technically, the Dodgers are up in winning percentage, but if they were to lose tonight, the Mets would take over first place in the National League. But I believe it's Dodgers and Mets would get the bye, and the Cubs would host the Giants. The Padres would host the Phillies. Those would both be really good series. But who is on the outside looking in? Because sometimes when you're looking at individual divisions, it's hard to see. So from the Giants, who are the final wild card spot right now, the Cardinals are just 1 game out. And again, notice that 9-game winning streak that the Cardinals are on. So absolutely on fire right now. You got the Diamondbacks, and the Braves are just there lurking. They're only 3 games out of a playoff spot. So remember, even if the Braves maybe will never be able to make a push at the division here, there's still a chance that they can get in. And the last thing I want to do is see the Braves in the playoffs. But when you look and you kind of go down here, the Reds still really aren't out of it here. The Brewers aren't out of it. I would only say there's 4 teams that I would be amazed. And if you look at it, what do they all have in common? So look at the run differentials here. First of all, look at just the overall strength of the National League, because there's been a lot of interleague games, and you're going to probably see this is not going to be as high. But almost all of these teams have positive run differentials, with the exception of the Diamondbacks, who are only -1, and Brewers are -4. For those of you not familiar with a run differential, it just means how many runs you've scored versus how many runs you've given up. So the Mets actually have the highest run differential in the National League with 69. But you look at all these teams, they're all here. I would say that the Diamondbacks are probably playing over their heads a little bit, and maybe the Braves and the Brewers, they're probably about where they are. So then the only four teams that I would say, based on the run differential and their record together, that are probably out of it at this point in time are the Nationals, the Marlins, the Pirates, and the Rockies, which if you're facing those teams, you need to win the majority of those games. Good news for the Chicago Cubs and Cubs fans, that's actually quite a few of the teams are doing. Now we'll do the same thing over here in the American League, but you're going to notice some anomalies that'll be interesting here, and we'll point out maybe some hints at potential regression because ultimately you want to be consistently scoring more runs. You see the Tigers, they're leading the American League in run differential with plus 85, the Yankees plus 81. Now you notice the Mariners, though, they're only plus 11. You notice that even though they're leading the division, they've been struggling and they don't have this huge lead in division. So I would definitely be on the watch here. And who has a better run differential in the American League West than the Mariners? Well, right here, the team we were talking about a little bit ago, the Houston Astros are a plus 20. So that would definitely be the thing. Now, is it a guarantee? Of course not. But it's something that I would be watching here. Continuing down here, the Guardians are probably playing over their heads a little bit, but they do currently have the lead in the wild card. The Royals, now they've done really well recently, so they're kind of making up for a bad start. It'll be interesting to see if that number stays there, or if they can keep increasing the run differential. And believe it or not, if the season ended today, now I don't know how to break the ties, but at least based on this, they're showing the final team in, or at least one of the teams in, the last spot for the wild card is the Athletics, the former Oakland Athletics, the quote unquote Sacramento Athletics. Let's see. And again, very kudos to them. However, if I'm looking here at this minus 38, it tells me that they're probably playing over their heads a little bit, and be aware. Now, another team that is just doing awesome right now in that 8-game win streak is the Twins. You'll notice the plus run differential and beating teams like the Mets. And when we lost two out of 3 to the Twins, it felt bad. But now you look back and you realize, well, maybe they had a really bad start. Maybe they're a much better team than we thought they were when we played them. It doesn't excuse not winning the series because we're Mets fans about that. Another team that I'd be on the lookout for here, for a team that can make a run, would be the Red Sox. But I would say you definitely, the Blue Jays are still in, the Rays are still in it. And no team is out of it. In fact, the most interesting thing that I would say here is, the White Sox have lost 29 games, and the run differential is almost minus 35, which means the White Sox are probably a better team than we think. But the Orioles and the Angels here, that's really danger. All right. D-Rel, trade Baty for a frontline starter. D-Rel, so for those of you who are just not familiar with Mets fandom, I don't understand what it is. If it's just the natural impatience of Mets fans or what it is. But there is just this constant group of Mets fans who constantly want to see the young guys fail. It's almost like self-punishment for just not wanting to see the Mets be able to actually bring someone through their system. And it was like the people who were like, oh, we're done with Pete Alonso, we don't want him back. So Midnight, yeah, why would you trade Baty? He's been your entire offense 2 of the last 3 games. It is true. So, yep. Bruce, this is Ryan. Every time we trade someone, we get burned. Keep what we got, build cohesion and loyalty. The fans will come to understand. Teamwork wins more than a superstar. And I think that's exactly it. Midnight, you're bringing like the outside perspective. And like I said, I come to this from not like I'm a Major League Baseball coach, okay? But I look at things like a coach looks at them. And, Carlos Mendoza was clear in the postgame today that they did not send Baty down as punishment or relegation or because he deserved to go to AAA. In fact, if you remember, he actually homered the game before they sent him down. They just sent him down because of a roster configuration. They had to do it because they had to have another true outfielder up when Jose Siri went down. That's all it was. And I think Baty's going to be here to stay. I do think there are scenarios where Baty gets traded, but those scenarios are going to be much more in line with if the Mets are confident in what they have with Ronnie Mauricio coming back. But right now, being able to have Baty play second, slide over to third for defense for Vientos, or have Baty play third I mean, look, you can say what you want, but I don't think Baty has that ball go through his glove because Baty knows his equipment well enough to not have that there. Um, and so I just think that look, you can have all these guys in line. There's room. There is room, and the Mets are going to continue to make room, and they're going to continue to experiment to put the best lineup on the field. Um, again, I've said this since spring training too. Yeah, it is this is such this Brett Baty thing is such a strange divide that is um it's just such a strange divide in the Mets fan world. And I'm just in the look, there's so many guys over the years that we've traded away that end up coming back to bite us. And when you trade them away for no particular reason, look, if we can get a good return for Baty that's going to truly help the team, that's fine. But I 100% am happy. I like the lineup that we put out yesterday. I would much rather see Vientos be our designated hitter than Starling Marte at this point in his career. I don't mind keeping a Marte or a Winker on this team as a veteran presence, as a guy who can do, but I don't really feel like we need both of them on this team. And I think you're going to see a point in time, just like right now as Mets fans, you can say it almost feels like forever ago that our designated hitter platoon was Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelback. Like that feels so long ago. I think there's going to come a time in not too many years that you're going to say, man, it feels so long ago that our designated hitter platoon was Starling Marte and Jesse Winker. And again, it's nothing against those guys, but if you're trying to be a premium position, who do the Dodgers have as their designated hitter? Like the best hitter in baseball. And the Mets need to eventually figure out this designated hitter position and put someone in there who is an absolute offensive stud, night in, night out. And it's going to have to be someone who's one of the top players in baseball. And the Mets are going to get there eventually. So that's what it is. Yeah. Vientos carried the Mets to the NLCS with Lindor. Brett Baty will never do. Yeah, but you don't need him to do that because Brett Baty literally carried the Mets to a win tonight. And you've got to remember, and he almost carried him to the win the other night. I mean, dude had 2 home runs and 5 RBIs. It's like, look, let these guys be who they're going to be. Baty is a part of the team. He's well loved on the team, and doing that. So, yeah, don't know. And again, we got look, we can have our disagreements here, for sure. So just make sure we keep it focused on the topic at hand, not on the individual people, for sure. So, we got to make sure that this stays good working with each other. But yeah, right. And that's the next thing. Like I posted a video earlier this season. Is Pete Alonso clutch? I think it's starting to become a legit question we have to see is Brett Baty someone that you can call as clutch? So we'll see. Starling Marte is a good play. Yeah, I mean there's times and situations do that. And Tyler Naquin. Ooh. See, I've already put that one out of my mind. Yep, absolutely. I've already put that one out of my mind. Like you have to okay, I don't like the designated hitter. I'm an old school fan, but it's here. And you better make sure that your designated hitter is a guy who can be constantly hitting 280, 290 plus, getting on base all the time. Like it just can't be something like that. So, but again, Redman, with all these questions the Mets have, you don't need to worry. Like you have time to try things out. When you are winning and you're winning consistently, you can try moving pieces around. And basically, from now until the trade deadline is the Mets trying to figure out who's going to fit where. There's going to be new players coming to this team for sure in the bullpen. I feel 95% sure. I feel probably least certain the Mets will bring in another pitcher because we're already assuming Manaea, Montas, Blackburn, Rayleigh all make good recoveries and are ready to go. That's one reliever and 3 starting pitchers potentially the Mets have coming back. So Mets fans are extremely emotional. They'll kill one day and be on your side the next. Absolutely. Sounds like Broncos fans. Doesn't sound like Dolphins fans who just quit on the season before the season even started. Francisco Lindor, Juan Pete are going to hit every day. Both if lineups have to step up. Yep. Midnight is Denver area. So Nimmo's defense has been absolutely stellar the last 2 days. So, yep. Absolutely. So that's where I'm at. If you guys have any other thoughts, otherwise we're going to wrap things up. This is kind of our first try. think we did one other post game earlier, but definitely wanted to wrap things up for those of you who are either here or not here. Again, we can check the scores really quick, just on any of the games that are still going on, which there's a few. We'll do a last minute score update here of the games in progress. There's 5 games in progress as we speak. So I'll show those really quick. This is your last chance. You got any other comments? Anything else that you want to share, you can hop in now and do that. I appreciate you guys again. As long as you keep the conversation directed at the topics at hand and not the individual people, that's good. All right. So 5 games in progress. White Sox Reds are tied up at 1. That's going to extra innings. Padres lead the Angels 2-1. That doesn't mean anything after the Angels come back yesterday. Mariners continue to lead the Yankees 1-0. Yankees only have 1 hit in the game, but that game is far from over as well. Giants lead the Diamondbacks 4-3. And the Athletics have an early lead on the Dodgers, so let's go Athletics. Probably that Athletics-Dodgers game is the game I'm going to put on while I'm wrapping things up here tonight. What do you think trade rumors involving Tidwell? Yeah, Luis Robert. So here's the thing. I don't mind bringing Luis Robert over on a flyer. I don't mind paying this contract because it's not my money. Where I get nervous is the Tidwell being the one that we would want to trade there. I just don't. I don't mind packaging up a bunch of like single A and double A guys, that we can kind of pretty easily replace, stuff like that. I mean, the White Sox are probably not going to give up for Robert for that little. I do think you guys know me. I do believe the Mets need a front line top tier center fielder. My dream center fielder, which is looking more and more like a fantasy than even a possibility, is Byron Buxton. When the Twins were struggling, I was 100% all over this idea that the Mets could I'd be a little more willing to trade for there. But Luis Robert Jr. is a reclamation project. There is no guarantee that he's going to be any better than what Jose Siri is already providing for us. And so I just think that we should be super cautious. I'm sure Stearns is going to do due diligence. I have a high confidence that Stearns is not going to ever get ripped off in a deal. There might be some deals that he gets the worst end of, but I don't think there's going to be deals like the Pete Crow Armstrong for Javi Baez under the Stearns regime because there's just no need to go for it. So I would not mind taking a flyer on Robert. I think that's how you say it. I know it says Robert, but I think Robert is the proper way to say his name. If I'm wrong, correct me. With that, I'm not a White Sox aficionado. He's young. He's under team control, so there are some good things about it. But, I mean, if you bring in Robert, that's probably the end of – well, I mean, Zokar's going down, but it's the end of either Tyrone Taylor or Jose Siri. And it's probably Jose Siri. It's probably the end of the Jose Siri experiment. I would much prefer to try to work a deal. If we're going to send Tidwell in that, then I'd also want to send Starling Marte out of here. Again, then maybe you could keep Siri. And like just keeping guys who are primarily designated hitters other than like an Ohtani, but even that, I just don't want guys that they're part-time designated hitters. I just don't. I want guys who can at least play the field some. And again, this is, I know it was unfortunate, but like Jesse Winker would play him in the outfield for one game, he gets hurt. Like I want guys who we can have in a semi-regular rotation out there. I still think that there's very good potential for eventually in the next 2 to 3 years for Vientos to just move into a full-time slugger / designated hitter role. I just think that there's that possibility I could do that. You still get hate from Broncos fans from a Super Bowl a decade ago that they won. And it's like Dolphins fans still bragging about the perfect season. Rels, I mean, that I could see that being a thing that potentially the White Sox would consider, but I'm also guessing the White Sox are going to want to get pitching and or an outfielder for it as well. Why is Francisco Lindor not an all-star with the Mets? Simply because he gets off to slow starts, and the all-star game rewards players who get off to fast starts in the first half of the season. Lindor should be an all-star this season. Mets fans do need to get out and vote. It should be, at this point in time, the Mets have a legitimate claim for Lindor should be an all-star. Soto should be an all-star. Alonso should be an all-star. Griffin Canning should be an all-star. Kodai Senga should be an all-star. Bare minimum 5 as of right now. As of right now, I say 5. So why don't you guys post in the comments below not who do you think would get in, but and I know we're all Mets fans, or mostly Mets fans, so try not to let your bias be too much. But who do you legitimately think deserves an all-star bid? So it's all we got, Midnight. It's all we got. But I don't ever brag about it simply because it wasn't even in my lifetime. I'll brag on Marino still. I'll still brag on Marino doing that. Yeah. Well, exactly, Darren. Like Stearns is not going to be dealing away guys that have high upside in the majors if he doesn't see a legit return for them whatsoever. All right. Rels says agreed. Lindor, Pete, Soto, Senga, Canning. Lindor, Marte, Pete, Soto, Edwin Diaz. I mean, I just always feel like you really shouldn't brag about anything your team has done before you were born, right? So, like, if you're a Yankees fan and you were born after the year 2000, you don't get to claim any of those 90s championships. Just saying. If you were born after Derek Jeter retired, you get no claim on any of that. You only get to claim your lifetime. That's my philosophy. Because I wasn't there. I can't even say that 1 ounce of my cheering changed the ether in the universe to make the Mets win a game. I can't do that. So Lindor, Alonso, Soto, Holmes. Yeah, I mean, look, the Mets have 3 legit pitchers, starting pitchers. I mean, how do you leave Senga out with his 1.2 ERA? Griffin Canning is there. So Redman, maybe you missed it at the beginning, but we addressed that. The Mets are middle of the pack in Major League Baseball. And even over the last 3 games, they're middle of the pack. I know we don't like to hear it, but it's really not as bad as you think. So if you guys are harping on the runners in scoring position, just look at the stats. It's just not a big deal. If you're a Yankees fan, you should be bragging about Ruth, Mays, Robinson, Garrett. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, probably I would too. Now, I know I've mentioned this before, but Bobby Richardson, who was a player back in the Mantle days, I actually have his autograph. He's passed away quite a few years ago now, but I've actually met some of his grandkids. So, and I know some of Bobby Richardson's grandkids. Of course, they're huge Yankee fans. So, yeah. Well, Lindor got absolutely robbed on the Gold Glove. Absolutely robbed. So I agree. But this is the year. But Mets fans also have to get out and vote. It'll be interesting to see how everything plays out with All-Star voting. But yeah, I mean, remember, fans don't vote on pitchers. I think it's highly unlikely the Mets get 3 starting pitchers into the All-Star game, just because a lot of teams, that's the one player they're going to get in is either a starter or a reliever. So it's going to be hard for the Mets to get 3 starting pitchers to the All-Star game. But I mean, you can argue, and of course, you've got to give it another 6 weeks here before you really know how it all plays out. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and there's going to be relief pitchers that'll be at least in the mix here if they can hold things here too. So Huascar Brazoban is one that I would definitely consider, but it's just going to be hard for the Mets to get more than probably about 6 in, because the Dodgers are going to take a bunch of spots. There's a bunch of Padres players that are just legit good too. Jackson Merrill, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr. They're all going to have spots, of course. Shohei's going to have a spot, and every National League team is going to get one player. I mean, so it's going to be hard for the Mets to get more than about 5 or 6 in, but there's 5 or 6 that I think are genuinely Deserving. Redman, Brandon Nimmo needs to stop batting fourth. I would prefer Vientos in the 4 spot and Nimmo in the 5 spot. But Nimmo's doing well the last couple of days, and Nimmo looks like he's pulled back from trying to hit quite as many home runs and is trying to put the ball in play. So, for example, I just want to look at this here really quick. Batting average over the last 15 days. Let's see if I can find. Over the last 15 days, Brandon Nimmo's batting average is 298, guys. Brandon was hitting almost 300 over the last 2 weeks. So what you have to remember is stats in baseball change quickly. And your bias that you had 2 weeks ago could be completely blown up from there. So in the last 2 weeks, Brandon Nimmo is hitting 298 with 4 home runs. 4 home runs, 10 runs scored, 13 RBIs. I mean, he's absolutely on fire with an OPS over 1,000, 1,027 OPS. So, personally, I'd rather have Vientos in 4 and have Nimmo hitting behind him to back him up, and Nimmo kind of being like leadoff hitter number 2 in the 5 hole. But to me, that's small potatoes. But he's not. That's the thing, Redman, is he's not struggling. The analytics and the stats change so fast. And by the time you get upset or frustrated with how one player is doing, you have to realize, like, oh, they've already broken out of it. For example, the same thing's true the other way. Pete Alonso is doing really not great over the last week. Okay? So I want you to understand, like, stuff changes quick. Now, that doesn't mean Pete Alonso's not having a great season, okay? I'm not trying to argue that, but Pete Alonso is struggling. Do you know what Pete Alonso's hitting over the last week? Anybody know Pete Alonso's batting? I don't know if it includes tonight. If it does, it's even lower than this. I don't know how updated this is. So last 7 to 8 days, roughly. Pete Alonso batting average. Somebody want to guess in the chat? It's putrid. It's the same level that you guys were all saying that Brett Baty needed to be gone from this team forever. Yeah, you're right around midnight. You were right there. He's hitting 160. Over the last week, Pete Alonso is hitting 160. Like, you have to understand how quickly in baseball, stats change up or down, for the better, for the worse. It changes so fast. And if you're all emotional about Brandon Nimmo not hitting, you have to realize that over the last 2 weeks, Brandon Nimmo's been, he's hitting 160, Redman. This is what I'm saying. You're off by a huge amount. His batting average for the season is 310, but over the last week, it's 160. And that's how quickly things change. And this is why baseball is a long game. You're going to have slumps, and different guys are going to hit at different times, but you don't go panic mode. Nobody is saying Pete Alonso needs to quit, be fired, sent down to the minors, be traded because he's hitting 160 over the past week. Because it's a law of averages. Pete Alonso was never going to hit 350 for the season. He's not that type of hitter. He's not Luis Arias. He's not going to hit that for the season. But he still might hit 270, 285, 290 for a season. But part of the reason he's going to get there is because he's going to have a week where he's going to hit 160. But you know what? There is zero panic in Mets world because over the past 2 weeks, Brandon Nimmo's been hitting 300. Let's see. Just want to see what Baty's hitting over the last 2 weeks. Over the last 2 weeks, Brett Baty's hitting 286. Oh, it's over the last week. Sorry. Over the last week, Brett Baty's hitting 286. Mark Vientos, over the last 2 weeks, is hitting 412, guys. Right. But that's exactly what he's doing, Redman, is he's constantly making the adjustments. So just understand that stats change so quick, and who's hot 1 week can be absolutely frigid cold the next. And this is true batters and teams. This is why you look at the big picture. Like, is it fine to look at trends? Absolutely. Look at trends. But the trend is right now, over the last 1 to 2 weeks, I don't know if they're the 3 best, but Soto's probably in there too. Hold on, what's Soto hitting over the last week? Yeah, see, Soto's back to hitting 217 over the past week. But his on-base percentage is 320. You know, but three of our top hitters last 1 to 2 weeks. Baty, Vientos, Nimmo. And you know what? If we do this same video and we do this research 2 weeks from now, the top three hitters could be, you know, like anybody know what Luis Angel Acuna is hitting over the last week? Only 200. I don't want to send Luis Angel Acuna down because he's hitting 200. Because a week or two from now, well, Redman, he knows this though. Like there's so many these conversations going on behind the scenes. And it's not always about that. Sometimes it's about alternating lefties and righties. It has to do with who's pitching. It has to do with who's on the bench. It's a lot more that goes with it. Obviously, what Nimmo is doing right now and what Mendoza is doing with Nimmo is working. You just have to realize that it's constantly changing, and what you think isn't working because of whatever maybe actually is working in the meantime. And so that's all I want you guys to know and understand. Things change so quick. And a week and a half from now, you could be talking about how the best three hitters on the Mets are Pete Alonso. By the way, Lindor over the last week is hitting 385. Right? And it doesn't feel like it tonight because he had a rough night, but he was hitting 385 over last week coming into the game. It's just constantly changing. And that's why you ride players when they're hot. You know, I'm looking up some of the others here. Yeah, like Tyrone Taylor's hitting 125 over the last week. Over the last week, yeah, 160 for Pete Alonso. Francisco Alvarez, he's hitting 333 over the past week, and people on Mets message forums are like, "We're done with the Francisco Alvarez experiment." Why? Because he's hitting 333. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Mets winning Darren should help a lot. You know, I think it's been hard. Like, there was no motivation to vote last year with how horrible the Mets played May into June. I mean, it just killed pretty much every Mets chance. So I think Soto will gather the votes, different things like that. So, all right. Well, that being said, I appreciate everybody. It is going to be time for me to go. It is getting late, and I do have some stuff that I need to do. Thank you guys for joining on maybe not our first ever, but our first post-game report in recent history. Hope that was good for you. Please, again, hit your like, hit your subscribing away. Oh, a couple questions I missed here. Sorry. What if two people are comfortable in the same slot? Yeah. So that's, again, you're going to have platoons. You're going to have manager ideas. I don't think players are super comfortable in particular slots in general. I think most players are just like, just put me in the lineup wherever and I'll hit. I think that's how the vast majority of them are. So appreciate that. Your dad says Francisco Alvarez trying to hit home runs. Yeah, probably. He's probably stressing a little bit, but it's because he wants to help the team. I think he's going to come around. With that, still love Francisco Lindor? Absolutely. Yeah, don't give up on a player because they're having a bad week. That's silly. This is baseball. Players have bad weeks, months, years. Don't stop cheering for them just because of that. At least you shouldn't. All right. With that being said, appreciate all of you. Again, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Good night to all of you. Appreciate you. Subscribers, fans, patrons, each and every one of you. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all and have a great night. Let's go Mets, baby.